Hello student, welcome to our channel, the one and only physics point. And in this lecture, we have started discussions of the new chapter from the 10th standard science part 1 of the Maharashtra State Board. The name of that chapter is the chemical reactions and equations. What are the chemical reactions, how it can be happened or how it can be occurred, what are the chemical components or the previous stage or after the process of the chemical reactions. In this lectures, we are done discussions about the introductions of the chemical reactions. In the chemical reactions are happen, there are two changes are occurs in that chemical reaction. These two changes are the physical and chemical changes. First one is the physical changes. That is the physical changes. When the ice gets melted, that means the ice is a solid state, it converts into the liquid state as a water. This phenomena occurs in the physical changes. That means in the physical changes, states of matters gets changes. States are changes. And what is the physical quantity which is responsible to change the chemical, the reactants into the product from the physical changes? What is the physical changes? That means two components are responsible, or two physical quantities are responsible for the physical changes. These two physical quantities are temperature and pressure. If we apply the pressure or temperature on any physical quantity in the previous stage, the gates changes its states of matters. If we apply the temperature of liquid, any liquid, for example, what we apply the pressure or temperature on the water, the gates evaporated. That means liquid is converted into the gaseous states. This is known as the physical changes. The two components are responsible. One is the temperature, another one is a pressure. For example, is that is ice gets changes. Ice are converted into the water, and water is also converted into the gas or vapor. These changes are is called as the physical changes. What is the next one? Next is the chemical changes. Chemical changes. When the chemical compositions of the matters gets changes in the process, these changes is known as the chemical changes. For example, the carbon is reacted with the oxygen molecules. This is the oxygen molecules. They converted into the carbon dioxide. The previous chemical compositions of the two reactants are different. One is the carbon, another one is the oxygen. They gets converted into the carbon dioxide. That means the chemical compositions are the combinations of different elements or different chemical targets changes. These changes is known as the chemical changes. That means these chemical changes are occurs in the three different bondings. Three different types of the bonding is metallic bonding, ionic bonding, and covalent bonding between the two different elements. These are all about the physical and chemical changes. Just when you read the title, chemical reaction, what are the chemical reactions? How it can occur and what types of the components are included in that chemical reactions, and how these chemical reactions are written in the form of equation, that is known as the chemical equations. First one, what is the chemical reactions? Next point is chemical reaction. Just to get the examples, consider the previous example when carbon is reacted with oxygen to form the carbon and carbon dioxide. The another one examples when the HCl acid, hydrochloric acid, is reacted with NaOH, sodium hydroxide, they gets converted into the sodium chloride as salt plus H2O water. What is the happen in these reactions? Chemical compositions of the reactant and products get changed. What is the reactants which is written, or the chemical components or chemical matters which are previous or before the chemical processor happens? What are the products what we are get after the chemical process or after any phenomena? And in the reactants, the hydrogen and chlorines are bonded to each other by any bonds. For example, metallic bond, ionic bond, covalent bonds. Then H, hydrogen is bonded with the chlorine, and sodium atom is bonded with hydroxide atoms or hydroxide molecules. In the chemical reaction, these bonds between the sodium and hydroxide gets break, and again in the another reactant, the hydrogen and chlorine, the bond between the hydrogen and chlorine are gets again breaks, and these bonds hydrogen is form the bond with the hydroxide OH, H and OH. New bonds are formed, and this sodium is formed the bond with another atoms, that is chlorine. That means the process, the phenomena, chemical reaction, it is the process, it is the phenomena in which the bond between the previous components gets break and new bonds and new chemical compounds are formed. This phenomena, this process is called as the chemical reaction. What is the chemical reactions? The process in which old bond between between two or more atoms or molecules, more atom or molecules, the process, it is chemical reaction, it is one of the process in which the old bond between the two or more atoms or chemical atoms or molecules get break, and molecules gets break and new bonds formed, new bonds are formed with the new chemical composition or new chemical compound. This process, new chemical compound, this process or this phenomena is called as the chemical reaction. Then these are the two types of chemical written in the these reactions, and these reactions is written in the form of chemical equations. Next point is, what are the chemical equations? The chemical reactions are written in the form of equation. This is known as the chemical equations. This chemical reaction, what is the happen in that chemical reactions? Old bond between the two or more atoms of the previous molecules or previous chemicals gets break, and new bond formed with the new chemical compound. This process is called as the chemical reaction. This process or these all processes are written in the form of equation. This is called as the chemical equations. Simple definition: the chemical reactions, the chemical reaction written, the chemical reaction written in the form of equation, in the form of equation is called chemical equation. It's called as chemical equations. And these chemical equations are written with the two different components. One is a reactant, another one is a product. What is the chemical equations? The chemical reactions. This is the chemical reactions when hydrochloric acid is reacted with NaOH to form the sodium chloride and waters. And these chemical all reactions, in that reactions, the bond between previous molecules, that is hydrogen and chlorine, gets break, and as similar to sodium and hydrogen, the bond between the sodium and hydroxides gets again break, and to form the bond between the sodium and chloride and hydrogen and hydroxides. New bonds are formed. Old bonds get breaks between in the old molecules or old chemical compounds. New bonds are formed with the new chemical compound. This is called as the chemical reaction. These chemical reactions is written in the form of equations with the, this is called as the chemical equations. In that chemical equation, there are two components. One is the reactant reactant, and another one is a product. What is the reactants? The chemical compositions of the chemical compounds in the given chemical equations before reactions, or the chemical components are gets reacted to each other. This is called as the reactants. The chemical compounds before the chemical process, before the chemical reaction. It is a simple example or simple definition to understand, easy to understand. The chemicals or the chemical compounds or number of compounds, they before the chemical reactions, or the chemical components they gets reacted. The chemical compound they gets reacted, or the chemical compound or molecule before chemical process or chemical reaction is called as reactants. And these reactants is always written in the left hand side of the chemical equations. The reactants is must be written in the left hand side of chemical equations. The new point is B, that is product. Products. What is the products? The new chemical compounds are formed after the chemical reaction. This is called as the product. Or these chemical compounds which are formed after the process, this is also called as the product. And product is must be written right hand side of the chemical equations. The product is must be written in the right hand side of the chemical equations. Just revise before vanish it what we are discussing. Introduction. The name of the chapter is chemical reactions and equations. This is the third chapter from the 10th standard Master State Board from the science part 1. In this lecture, we are taking the introductions. What is the chemical reactions? When any reactions are happened with the two changes, one is the physical, another is a chemical changes. What is the physical changes? If the state of matters gets changes in the process, these changes is called as the physical changes. That is, states of matters are changes. Example is when ice gets melted or we apply the temperature to the ice, they are converted into the water. Ice is a solid state, water is a liquid state. When again apply some pressures and temperature to the water, they gets converted into the vapor. Water is a liquid state and vapor is a gas state. And in these changes, the states are changed. These changes is called as the physical changes. The second one is chemical changes. In the chemical changes, any process, the chemical compositions of the reactants and products are gets changes. This is the single carbon atom, and this is the two oxygen molecules or two oxygen atoms are combined to each other to form oxygen molecules. They both are separated, but they both are combined to each other to change the chemical composition. This chemical composition is carbon dioxide. The chemical composition is changes. These changes is known as the chemical changes. What are the chemical reaction? The process in which the old bond between the molecules or old atoms or old chemical compounds, not atoms, old chemical compounds break, two or more atoms break and gets break and form new bonds formed, and new bonds are formed with the new chemical compounds. The new bonds are formed. The bond between the hydrogen and chlorine gets break to form the bond between the sodium and chlorine. New bonds are formed. This reaction, this process is called as the chemical reaction. And next point is what is the chemical equations? The chemical reactions written in the form of equations. The chemical reactions written in the form of equation. This is called as the chemical equations. Then the chemical reactions are the chemical equations are written with the help of two components. These two components is the reactant and product. The reactant, the chemical components gets reacted to form another chemical compounds, or the chemical compounds before the chemical process. This is called as the reactants. And what are the products? Products is the chemical compounds are found after the chemical reactions or any process. This chemical composition is known as product. This is all about the revisions. And the next point is there are two methods to return the chemical equation. There are one is the word method, another is the chemical equations. Word equation and chemical equations. First one is word equations. First one, word equations. When these chemical equations are written in the form of words or name of that chemicals which are included in that chemical reaction, this is called as the word equations. For example, this similar example what we have taken in previous points, that is sodium chloride NaCl plus sorry, HCl hydrochloric acid is react with the NaOH to give sodium chloride and H2O. But this is not a word equations. When the hydrochloric acid is react with sodium hydroxide, sodium hydroxide to give or to form sodium chloride, to form sodium, this is the sodium chloride and water. These above reactions are written in that manner or this manner. This is called as the word equations. Okay, the chemical equations written in the form of word or which is used to name of that chemical compounds which are included in that reactions or in that equations. This is called as the word equations. Correct. Then next one is what is the chemical equations? The chemical symbol are utilized to presentations of the chemical equations. This is called as the chemical equations or chemical equations. Okay. B, that is the chemical equation. Chemical equations. The symbol of the chemicals which are included in the chemical reactions or symbol of the atoms, compounds, molecules which is utilized or which are take the part of that chemical reactions are present. This is called as the chemical equations. Use the chemical symbol of the chemical compounds, chemical compositions instead of the word or instead of their name. This is called as the chemical equations. Then new another one examples uh, when this is the ethyl chloride is react with H2O to give ethyl alcohol plus HCl. This is not a proper reactions. This reaction, this product is as a reactant and reacted as a product. And after that, when the ethyl chloride is reacted with water to form the ethyl oxide, that is ethyl hydroxide, that means the ethyl alcohol and hydrochloric acid is formed. In that reactions, we doesn't use the name of that chemical compound, that is ethyl chloride, but we use the chemical symbol. Correct. That is again the same example. Carbon is reacted with oxygen to use the carbon dioxide. It doesn't use the name of the carbon. Is reacted with two oxygen atoms or oxygen molecules to give the carbon dioxide as like that. This is the chemical equations. And the next point is some rules which is used to present or write the chemical equations. There are four rules, and then we stop lecture. rules to return the chemical equations. There are rules to write chemical equation. Rules to write the chemical equation. There are first rule. First rule. The reactions, the chemical equations are in the chemical equation, the reactant which gets reactant is written in left hand side LHS and product in right hand side. When we return the chemical reactions, in chemical reactions, the reactant is must be reacted in the left hand, written in the left hand side, and product is must be written in the right hand side. And this is the reactants which get reacted, and this is the product, that is P and R for a reactant. The new chemical equation, that is when the HCl is reacted with the potassium hydroxide, these are the reactants to give product, that is the KCl, potassium chloride plus H2O water. This is the neutralization reaction. The reactants must be written in the left hand side, sir. This is the reactants. These are the reactants. Hydrochloric acid and potassium hydroxide are the reactants, and potassium chloride and water are the product. Product is must be written in the right hand side of right hand side. Then second, the arrow is used between reactant and product. The arrow is used between reactant and product. The arrow is shows the arrow shows direction of the arrow shows direction of chemical reaction or chemical process or chemical equations. This the reactants, the arrow is used between the reactant and product, or the arrow is used separated to the reactant and product. The new chemical equations, that are the carbon is react with oxygen to give the carbon dioxide. Carbon and oxygen to use the carbon dioxide. This is the reactant. Carbon and oxygen molecules are the reactant, and carbon dioxide is the product. In between them, we use a arrow, and this arrow shows the direction of chemical process or direction of chemical reaction. That means the chemical reaction is happen from the carbon dioxide to carbon and oxygen to the carbon dioxide. Then third, use plus symbol to separate two or two or more reactants or products. Two or more reactants and products. This is the chemical reactions. The next one is when this is sorry CH3 CH2 CH3. This is the propane is react with the water, or the propane is react with the HCl to give propyl chloride CH3 CH2, CH2, Cl, and H2 gas is released. In these reactions, we studied two different uh, laws or two different methods. When we return two or more chemical compounds as a reactant and product, two or more chemical compound as a reactant and product, we use the plus symbol between them to separate the number of chemicals, number of reactants and number of products with. Then another one is, for example, next one rule. There are 5 to 6 rules which is mentioned in the book for proper written chemical equations. The rule number 4 is use upward arrow for gas and arrow for precipitate for precipitate. Then this is the upward arrow for the gas when the gas is released from the chemical equations. This is similar to the, for example, uh, CH3 CH3 is reacted with the HCl to gives CH3 CH2 Cl. This is the precipitate plus H2 gas gets a release. Okay, and mention the state of reactants and product for more informative. Native of chemical equations. To get the more informative chemical equation must be mentioned. For example, this is in a aqueous solution water. This must be in the aqueous, and this is the again aqueous solution, and the water is and the hydrogen is a gas. We must be mentioned the states of that chemical reactor compounds which are included in the chemical reactions. It may be reactant and product also. The last one, the catalyst and heat. The catalyst or heat is written on the arrow. When the oxygen 6O2 molecules plus 12H2O, this is the photosynthesis reactions. These reactions happen in the chlorophyll under the sunlight. Sunlight is the catalyst. The catalyst is must be written on the arrows and gives, sorry, this is a carbon dioxide, 6CO2. Then we use 6 C6H12O6 plus 6H2O plus 12O2 or something 6O2. This is the chemical reactions. Or if we use heat as a catalyst, mention the symbol on arrow. And these are some rules to use the information or written the chemical equations more important. If you want to written the chemical equations is more informative, we must follow these 5 to 4 rules. First rules, in the chemical equations, the reactants are must be written in the left hand side and product is must be right hand side. As like this, hydrochloric acid and potassium hydroxide are the two reactants. It must be written in the left hand side of the arrows, and potassium chloride and water are the product which is written the right hand side of the arrows. The second one, the arrow is used between the reactant and product. This arrow is used between the reactant and product. The carbon and oxygen are the reactant, carbon dioxide is the product. They are separated with the arrows. This arrow is used between the reactant and product. The arrows show the direction of chemical reaction. These are the reactant and the products is formed, and the arrow will be shown the direction of chemical reactions. Then the third one, use the plus symbol between separate the two or more reactants or products. The plus symbol used to separate the two or more reactants and products. Then fourth one, use the upward directions arrow or downward directions arrow for the gases and precipitate also. If the gas is released, for example, hydrogen is gas released from this chemical reaction, use the upward direction shows this is the gas or identify this will be gas. Again, mention the state of reactants and product. For example, ethane is a aqueous solution. Hydrochloric acid is again aqueous solution. Ethyl chloride is aqueous solution or precipitate solid maybe. And again, the gas hydrogen is a gas. We use the state symbol for this explain the state of matter. Last one, the catalyst or heat which is used, which is help to complete the chemical reaction but does not involve in the chemical reaction. These are the catalyst. It is used on the arrows, are written on the arrows. For example, the symbol of heat when the chemical on examples, when the magnesium 2 Mg plus O2, these are heated to form magnesium oxide 2MgO. The heat is used in the chemical reaction and it is written or shows on the it is shows on the